Hello and welcome to our GIS Day celebration. So happy you are here. So happy to have our guest. We're going to have an exciting conversation today about GIS, and the theme today for this year for Esri's GIS celebration is celebrating the GIS professional. And we have an exciting lineup. And today I'm going to turn it over to our guest. Go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll get started.
Well, hi Philippa, thank you for having me here. And hello everyone, I'm Mrunalini Pise and I'm from India. I studied Geoinformation Sciences from ITC Faculty University of Twente in Netherlands. And currently I'm staying in Netherlands and I have a expertise in natural disaster and risk management. So let's move forward with, and I'm excited to have questions from you, Philippa.
Absolutely. So there's just a few things there. I'm going to start with, well, first of all, I'm just going to resonate with disaster management and how GIS is such an important part of it, and how many people and many communities and many local governments, state governments, federal governments need to have resiliency planning as part of their work. Emergency disaster management is huge, and GIS is an important factor in that and in the work, both for preparation, response, recovery. It's essential. And I think that there's just so much. I study human security and geospatial intelligence, so we're looking at that satellite imagery and drone imagery and all sorts of. But there's all sorts of other data that you can pull in and analyze, and so I just think that that's fantastic. But there's two-part question there. One is, what got you interested in GIS, and two, what got you interested in a specialty within disaster management and risk management?
Well, yeah, so Philippa, I totally agree with what you said right now about GIS, its use, and with the government, the resilience, and everything. I totally agree with that. And about your first question, how I got into GIS, honestly, I was specifically interested to do disaster management, and when I was doing my bachelor's in India, back in India, I wanted to do my higher studies out of India, so I started searching for the universities and I got into contact with the University of Twente. I explored them and I saw that their course is amazing. So I came here. And about your first question, honestly, I got a real introduction of GIS when I came here. Being in the ITC faculty, it is amazing. They have an amazing course structure for geoinformation sciences. They have amazing faculty, good teachers, and they're always helping you out there. So for me, GIS was a very new field at that time, and I initially it was difficult for me to get introduced with it because there were a lot of things to do under geoinformation sciences, lot of concepts. But the more I did it, I fell in love with that, and I got more specific with my interest, and I found my passion through it. So yeah.
And I think one of the things I learned, because I had an interview where I had a question come from the audience, and she said, "This is a serious question. I'm not joking. Did you cry when you were learning ArcGIS Pro?" And my answer was yes, yes, I did,
Yes.
because there is a steep learning curve to it, and it takes time, and you will fall down tech holes, as I have, I'm sure you have, where you just are you, but it's you kind of unravel it. You kind of have to just give it time and let it unfold, and let the problem reveal itself, or ask for help, or it's collaborative. It's quiet in nature because you have to kind of go through the steps yourself, but it's also collaborative in nature because you're not the only one who's encountered that problem or that issue in this learning curve, and it is a learning curve. One of the things I'll say that for me was more approachable is, I've always loved math. I do have a father who is an engineer turned accountant, so I grew up with a love and appreciation of math, and he gave me a really solid foundation in math and enthusiasm for math. But I never, and I don't know if it's more the American culture or being a woman in the American culture, I never felt like I was very much supported after high school in going further with math.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was in the arts and the entertainment and the media, and a lot of that's separated from sciences. And when I found myself wanting to go back into science, there was no starting point. It's not like I had the math background to go into aerospace engineering or even electrical engineering, or even general engineering. They were like, you don't have the calculus, you don't have the statistics. And there's a lot of math in GIS. But what I liked about GIS is that, because I thought it was a leap for me, because even though I'd finished a master's in urban planning, I was like, okay, I'm applying for a sciences program. Am I going to be able to make this transition? And some of the thought process was a bit different, and it took me some time to sort of get up to speed with it, to sort of understand it. But I wasn't on the back foot as far as not having the math. Now I'm sort of self-studying to get more math behind me so that I can really do more with statistics and really understand how calculus plays a role. But so I would just sort of say, what was your background before you got into GIS? Because
Yeah.
for me, I was very fortunate. Like, it just felt like there was an easier transition. Like, it was difficult, but it was doable. Whereas there are other sciences that I probably would not have been able to make as easy a transition into.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I mean, so my background was I did my bachelor's in geology, but I also don't have mathematic background. I didn't study maths after my 10th. So actually, in GIS, depends on what kind of field you take. So, for example, if you go to water resource management, you need to have maths background because you have to deal with lot of statistics there. But the field that I chose, natural disaster and risk management, there mathematics was less, programming was more, and like so for me it was not that difficult to manage in this field because the mathematics requirement was very less. So it depends on what kind of specialization you enter into. And of course, if you don't have mathematics, some of the subjects becomes more difficult for you. So of course you need that. I totally agree with that.
Well, I think what it helps is because I do feel I hear around like some people are like, I don't understand how math applies or why I need to learn this. And I do feel like if you have a goal or have a purpose, it's a lot easier to learn. So if anything, it sparked my enthusiasm to learn. And there are just so many great free low cost resources out there. Like Khan Academy is one of them. And there's just a million YouTube videos. So if once you're inspire, or ebooks or books or what, there are just many places that once you're inspired to say, okay, I want that. And a lot of it is not so much knowing how to do the calculation, because the computer does a lot of the calculations.
Yeah,
It's just knowing the language of it. What does Boolean mean? What does Euclidean mean? And
yeah,
just
for
basic
sure
things of
it
just,
is.
what is min, max, mean, average, median.
It's just the basic ones. If you know the basic concept, you are able to do it, right? So whenever it comes about the topic of maths in studying, then you need to go to have some references. As you said, there are a lot of videos out there, so you can anytime go and learn about it. Because nowadays we have everything on internet, everything is available. So I feel like, yeah, if you even if you don't know what it is, you can just google it or just go on YouTube or go on any other website and just search about it. You have resources out there.
But that's the self-study for math. What I will say is I did ask someone before I started my program, can I learn GIS on my own? And he said, I wouldn't really recommend that. I would recommend an academic program, to which I signed up. And the same school that I did my master's in, the same one I had done my undergraduate. So I'm at the USC Spatial Sciences Institute, which I adore. And I love it because it's so intersectional. There's so many applications for it. Now let's drill a little bit further into your application of it, which I'm super interested in. Is I want to know more about, let me get is the application of disaster management. Obviously, a disaster happens, but there's knowledge, and you're a geologist, so you know that science behind what can we expect, especially if it has anything to do with uh, I would say with the Earth, for like a volcano or other systems, water systems. But we have natural disasters, we have technological disasters, we have all sorts of things that are threats. I've done my basic course, so understanding the difference between threats and risks. That not everything impacts everybody the same, and being prepared. So where do you fall in your work in the analysis of this is something that could be a problem, or this is a problem and now we're dealing with it, or after the fact we're helping people recover from something that's happened? Where does your work actually, like, who do you work with, and what are the processes and problems that you're addressing?
Well, so that's actually a very good question. So basically, right, like as you asked me that whom I'm working with, currently I'm not working with any company, or I'm not doing any research. I'm working on my own startup. But to give your answer, being a GIS person, we we study every aspect of disaster. So whether it be a pre-disaster events, or whether it be a post-disaster event, or what to do during disaster, we study everything. So then, like, we understand what kind of data we need if we want to know the pre-disaster situation. If we want to know what if let's take an example, a flood has arrived, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to understand when the flood will come, let's, like, in a simple way, to predict the flood, we need to take a past historic data and analyze it. We need to build a predictive models, and there's where AI helps a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then if we want to understand, now the flood has come, after that, what people are suffered from that, buildings have destructed, everything has happened. But now we need to do a planning, what we are going to do after that, how we are going to recover it, right? So for that also we study all these things. We also study during the flood what kind of things will happen, what kind of things are happening depending on the past flood data, and also predict the flood. So just an example, so for every disaster, we we have to study every aspect of it.
Yeah. No, that's what we were introduced to, sort of that before, during, and after. And I was just curious if you had a specialty in there, but you're saying, "Hey, no, we're pretty comprehensive in that planning." And who is your audience for this? Because I feel like sometimes um, local governments or state governments or federal governments are involved in this type of work. But really, at the end of the day, it's the citizen, it's the person who is going to feel that impact, if and that danger, and sort of that the human security side of it. How do you protect people? And I feel like a lot of the disasters that we've seen lately have really had gaps in communication. I think that's why, to me, having the stage and having this conversation is so important, because I feel like GIS people have all this important information, and sometimes we rely on the government officials to communicate it, and sometimes they fail in doing so. And so I think it's important for GIS people to explain, and have more people in the public understand what this work is that you do. And so where do you, like, who are your customers, and then how is all of this good work, really land with the people that you're trying to protect or help to recover?
Yeah, so basically about the communication gap that happens between the government or people who are and the people who are suffering from this kind of disasters. It's because of the lack of facilities that are there out. But we as a GIS people, we do analysis. We help government to understand when the disaster is going to come, and what to do after it comes, what to do during the to prevent that disaster. So we as a GIS people totally rely on the data set that we have. If we lack with the data set, we also are in the limitation of doing analysis. We are also limitation of giving accurate information. It all depends on what kind of data set is available out there. So
And that has a lot that no, that's an excellent point because that's what we do. We put data on maps and then we analyze that data and we prepare and we use maps as a way to communicate and a way to plan. And I think
yeah,
some of the gaps that we've seen, I think of Hawaii, for example, that there was no alarm, there was no text, there was no siren, there was nothing that anybody felt like they had any warning about. It just was like whoosh, and then the town was gone. And so I feel like that the more that that communication can happen, but it is a two-way street because if the government doesn't provide the data and they're not actively collecting it, managing it, there's all sorts of privacy issues that have to be like handled, data governance, data security. Like there, it's a wide field of all of these moving parts that have to work together. We have satellite imagery. I mean, that is now we're at a point where every inch of our planet is photographed every 24 hours. So that really helps us. And that's been happening for the last 20 years or so that we have that kind of Landsat data. But
yeah.
we do rely on other people. So what kind of data sources are you looking for? What have you found to be good and reliable data sources, and where do you see that there's some gaps that could be people could do better?
That's actually a very good question. So basically, of course, satellite imageries are there, right? But some of the information that we need is through the ground data set. The data set that is collected through the survey and the people go and collect data set. We need that data set for more accurate to give accurate analysis, right? Because with the satellite imagery we can for sure understand what the disaster is, how it is coming, when it will come, but to understand the impact, to understand what impact it is going to happen on people, on the resources, we need that ground data. And I think here comes the importance of the organizations that are working on ground.
Mhm.
Organizations like Red Cross, they are working rigorously, they are trying to improve the situation, and I truly appreciate the work they are doing. So I think day by day they are like improvement is happening, and we are getting there, we are getting towards the the success point, that where we can reach at the level where we don't see any impact, right? It is ideal situation, but yeah, but I think people are working very hard, GIS experts are working very hard through this organizations. So yeah.
And it's interesting, I would say, when people are in an emergency situation like a Red Cross, and you're really focused on meeting people's basic needs, giving them shelter, giving them food, giving them water, just basic hygiene, just all of the things that people just need to do to live. And then and it's hard to think about, okay, we're here collecting data while we're delivering these services, but they sort of have to happen concurrently because they need to know what worked, what didn't work, what was needed, what was an overstock, what was an understock of things so that they can deploy those resources efficiently and plan ahead and have kind of those after action reports of what worked and what could work better. And so that it's a constantly improving system. And that, but that they do have to have systems in place that collect the data and make that data usable while they're still dealing with actually helping people in an emergency.
Yeah, that's right. But I think these are the huge organizations, and they have their own sectors. They have their own people working on different areas, right? So basically, it's not only Red Cross, but also let's World Bank also collect data, ground data. You can see on their website, you'll find a good data set out there. But why it is very difficult to get such data sets? Because of the disasters that happen, because of the situations, and because in some of the areas there are conflicts. So it's very difficult to get such kind of data set that we really need the information that we need to predict our impacts, to predict the disaster, to go towards resilience, right? So we also need to consider the situations that are there.
Yeah, and war obviously it makes it very, very difficult, and yet that's kind of where the help sometimes is needed the most.
Yeah,
And so you brought up, and let's continue on this because I think it's an interest that we both share, AI and the future that AI is absolutely impacting um, every aspect of our society, and everything from generative AI to the machine learning and deep learning. Where have you started using it? Started learning about it? Where's your sort of point of entry for AI? What do you see, and how do you see it growing and evolving? I mean, there's a lot of questions there. Just basically take what you want and run with it. But AI.
well, I think AI is one word, amazing. Amazing in the GIS field for sure, because it has helped GIS to grow a lot. It it has made a lot of things easy. Plus, let's say that a few years back when we were relying on 2D maps, we were still struggling to get the accuracy that we want. We were still struggling to get the complexity of the data that we need to do precise analysis, right?
Mhm.
But after the AI came, we started doing machine learning, making machine learning models, and how tremendously this thing has changed in the GIS field, that now we are building 3D maps, we are getting accuracy, a good accuracy. We are actually growing a lot. And I think that AI is actually very beneficial for the people who are working in this field, because it makes their work easy. Plus, it's a tremendous growth we have seen in this field because of artificial intelligence.
And so just basically let's recap some of the things that artificial intelligence can do for GIS. So we know that, and I'll just kind of just broadly speaking, I'll sort of share my understanding, and you can sort of supplement this. That machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence,
Yeah,
and then deep learning is a subset of machine learning. Machine learning is good at tabular data, so things structured data, and deep learning is good for unstructured data, more like raster data sets or like a tweet thread, and sort of what is sort of sentimental data. And it can just takes more time because it's unstructured, but it can get there.
yeah,
And a lot of the machine learning, it's like you can give it to an input and an output, and then it figures out the calculation. What got us there? What's the and sort of it is able to put that together. And so with that, we're seeing it for image categorization. We're seeing it for change detection. We're seeing it that, things that were just manual processes that took people a lot of time, it can sort of can do those things. What other applications are you seeing that I might have missed, or that you see it in use?
I think the most important one, because like sticking to my own background, I think the most important aspect of machine learning is the predictive analysis that we can do.
Right.
Right. So, because I'm sticking to the disaster part because it's my specialization, so I can talk very well about it. I think machine learning is a very good platform, or the, let's say, a thing that we have got, because it has made modeling very easy. And the accuracy that we, because in the predictive models we, accuracy matters a lot.
Hmm.
So I think that is the one thing that I prefer about machine learning. Yeah.
What tools do you use for machine learning? So the ones that I'm familiar with are sort of within the Google ecosystem, is like TensorFlow. But what, and I know that within Esri, they have Geo AI tools that actually are an upcoming lecture in one of my GIS programming and customization class.
Mhm.
What tools do you use for machine learning within AI?
To
And what are
be
your preferred platforms, just in general?
Yeah, so to be honest, personally, I haven't done machine learning modeling, but I am aware of it. So during my studies, I prefer to work more with the GIS softwares because my interest in coding is not that much. But I'm aware of all this technology because of my interest in this field, and I I really appreciate the presence of this kind of technology. So I don't think I will be able to give that answer because I haven't used it, but
Okay.
I'm aware of it.
And so I did an intro to machine learning interview, and we spent an hour, and we can take you from zero to hero with an introduction to ML that we did, which is, I think, the thing about coding is not to be afraid of it. And I wish to actually say my favorite part of AI in GIS right now is the generative AI piece of it. You can tackle anything when you have half a computer brain. And so
Yeah,
I'm building things that I've never built before, and I could peek into books and tutorials, and I could take the long way around, and I try to, look at the documentation, look at the instructions. But like recently I have a project that it just bending my brain. I really didn't know how to approach it. So I took all the tutorial data and I just gave it to ChatGPT. And I was like, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this. And
yeah,
now
I
let's go.
agree.
Let's build this project together.
Yeah,
And the ability to go into ChatGPT and have it say, okay, what do I do next? Okay, what do I do next? Okay, my code's not working. Pop in the code, fix the code.
oh,
And so
for
I think
sure.
that it's easy to not be afraid of coding. I mean, definitely I have a little bit of an earlier background in it because I did a lot of it before a lot of the what you see is what you get, like more of the plug and play, because I have a background in digital marketing. And so I've always been on sort of following technology, but I built a lot of it in the early days, and then you didn't need to anymore because it all became kind of no code, low code solutions. And now I'm seeing that there's also a whole world that's coming in of no code and low code solutions. So you don't really need to think of yourself as a developer to still have access to these things.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with you. Like ChatGPT has made it very easy to, like, you don't need to code by yourself, you'll get it as it is. But it's about not being it's not, I'm not being afraid of coding. It's about the time that we get during our studies, a very compact, like a huge amount of study that we need to do within a less time, and in that phase you don't think of go extra, right? You try to stick to the things that you are good at and try to give your best. But after my studies I explored these things, and now is the thing that, yeah, I'm in coding and no coding part, I totally agree with that. For
Well,
me, coding is like just like the mathematics, as you said, that, right? It's a little bit of difficult and you need time to learn it, you need to go to tutorials and that, right? So it's totally that thing. But now the focus is different.
Well, I had the benefit of having classes that were specific to coding. So I'm with you that it's really hard to do things that are outside of that lane of like, this is what we're studying right now.
Yeah,
And
you'd be
so
focused.
yeah, so I have the benefit of, and that was something I wanted. And I think I went from a just certificate into the master's program. And I'm really glad I did because I'm feeling like I'm getting a really solid foundation. I don't think I would have quite been ready after the just certificate. Like it was really good, and I think that anybody who had a stronger maybe background than I did would have been like, I'm ready to go. And then
Mhm.
one of my classmates, she had done her undergraduate in GIS, and now this was just kind of taking it to the next level. But for me, coming in brand new, I needed more than just the 4 semester. Was it? Um, yeah, I took it for three. It would be 2 full-time semesters, but because I sort of
Yeah.
started layering in my second master's,
Hmm.
I kind of ran it out over 4 semesters. So generally speaking though, like now that I'm having these coding classes, I'm seeing like, oh wow, okay, I'm seeing this ability to customize, and I'm seeing how AI and machine learning kind of folds into it. And I'm building my first project in a 3D world that
Mm-hmm.
is using Google tools, and I've never used Google
Yeah.
tools, and it's using Cesium 3D tiling, and it's sort of it's something I've never tackled before, and so that's why having ChatGPT and Bard, sometimes I go back and forth between the two, and sort of when one kind of hallucinates on something, I'm like I'll have the other double check it. But it's been interesting to just use them as my co-pilot to build this project. And again, I preloaded them with all the tutorials so they knew exactly what we were kind of the frame that we were starting with. So I'm in the middle
You
of that
see, like
project.
there are a lot of things to do, you know. There are a lot of you can the more you experiment, the more you like it, the more you like you get more skills out of it, right? You build your skills into it. So just like you said before, that during the study period there's a very strict time frame, strict schedule, and we don't get time to get out of it and do things, right? But once you're done with it, you have a lot of time to explore. So now is the thing that whatever interest you have in different things, just like you said, that's experimenting with the bard, with the chat GPT, and you build your models, right? So it's quite interesting, right? Too, and I think it's also like everybody has like a personal choice where like when to choose to do things, right? So people who have a background with coding, they are good with it, they'll take a step to go ahead with it. But people who don't have a background with it, they'll still be scared to step into it. But now I think the platforms like ChatGPT and Bard has made it easy for them to get into it, right?
It really, really has. I think the biggest challenge that I had that class really helped me with, and I just think that this is, and I kind of when I want to go into, I have a couple more questions for you
Yeah.
with this. But one of the things I think that was very helpful for me is I found like a Python course that was the Google Python course, and I was like, okay, I'm ready to start learning. And but this was before it was part of the academic. It was actually right between the Christmas break, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I had trouble with what's called the IDE, the interpreter. You have to code Python in something. And then it has to look for a file of like, what are you working on and where do I save what you're working on? So I either need to pull from data or I need to write the data somewhere. And I did have the benefit of the year before in my urban planning, we did R. So I that was like, okay, I'm understanding some of the basics of this. This is very comfortable to me. And it was the R class that had me go, I love this. I am really seeing the potential with this. I want to do more of this. So it wasn't that I was at a complete standing start. And I said some of this had been in my background, but I couldn't figure out the IDEs. Like, what do you use and how do you connect it? And I just stopped because everything about strings and for loops and where loops and all that stuff like made sense to me, and how but I couldn't find a starting point. And I needed class to say, okay, here are your IDEs, here's how they work, here's how they work differently, here's why you would choose one or the other, here's the difference between sort of coding and commenting, and here's a notebook and how they're used. So I will say you either need a school structure or you need a support group and some kind of somebody to sort of have you just set up and just kind of understand the world of it and what tools to use when. And then you can kind of get in and sort of learn the details and, like I said, ask Bard questions. But that part of it was not a Bard question. Like, I didn't have a starting point on where do I go to code this. And
Mm-hmm.
now I have a much better understanding of that. You had mentioned earlier to me the concept of AR, VR, holograms as something that also had an interest to you. So I'd love to talk about that. And then another question that I'm going to sort of lean into either before or after that is organizations, because I talk about the idea that we don't want to do this alone. We want to be part of communities. And so as I've stepped into my graduate studies, I've also raised my hand and joined a ton of organizations. One of them that's been transformative for me is I became a Google Women Tech Makers Ambassador. I
Mm-hmm.
love the Google ecosystem, although it's been a bit challenging because we don't use Google in our schoolwork. We use Esri. And I'm trying to figure out like, well, where do Google and Esri connect? And now it's like there's a immersive geospatial challenge that Google put out. with Cesium, and I had already gotten a Cesium micro grant, and they said, go build a project. We'll complete your grant. And so I was like, ooh, okay, they've partnered. And my professor said, yep, you can make that project 5. So I have schools supporting my, I tried to do it tangentially, and I just did not have time. So more recently, I joined Women Plus in Geospatial, and I'm part of their peer mentorship group. So I'm super excited about that organization and getting to know more women in geospatial. I'm a women in GIS. I really like the women groups, and I'm just curious about, so again, those are kind of the 2 topics I kind of want to round out our conversation with. Are those that interest in sort of how do we connect, how do we build community, how do we grow, what are some of your favorite organizations, and then the whole AI VR hologram. So 2 separate questions. So start wherever you want, but those are kind of 2 of the things I think I'd like to see us talk about.
Oh, sorry. I just spilled the water.
Oh
Sorry.
no.
Yeah, sure. Actually, let's start with the organization part. So even I'm also part of Women Plus Geospatial group, and I really like it. I think it's been like more than 4 months I've been there, and what I have observed that this kind of platforms, the community platforms, help us to network very nicely, because on that, in like on women plus geo special group, there are a lot of women join from all over the world. I mean, can you imagine that sitting at one place you can talk to the, like you're sitting in, like I think in USA, right?
Hmm.
So we also met on that platform. So I think this kind of community groups or platforms are very important, because we get to know what is going on in our field, because people share their work. People also, it's also good for the job opportunities, because people also post the job opportunities there, so it's also good for that. Plus there are different events that come up, and you can, and myself, I talked with like more than, like till now, 3 to 4 people on that platform, and I just had a normal conversation with them. So what, like what are you what's going on with your work, and what are you up to? So yeah, I mean, it's good networking platform for me as such. So Women Plus Geo Special is actually good. And apart from that, I am a part of ESRI community, of course. And yeah, there's one more place that I like, GIS Lounge. And there's one magazine called GIS World, which keep posting about like new news about GIS, upcoming startups, like what is going on in the GIS field. So I think that platform is really good to keep to be updated with the GIS stuffs. Yeah. If you know any other platform, please recommend it to me. I'll be part of it.
I think those are the ones that you talked about. I think there's other ones that are more regional. So, for example, within the US, we have USGIF, which is the US uh, Geographic Intelligence Foundation. Orissa is something that I'm not a part of yet, but actually one of my guests is going to talk about her involvement with Orissa. But see, some of these are like US based. So I think
Mhm.
it's just, I think within, actually, I'm telling you, things I do on my own, but that I'm like, I have no time for, but I try to make time for, is I got a scholarship through Google for
Mhm.
all of their Coursera classes. So I've been leaning into taking their data analytics class, their cybersecurity class, and all of these other courses. And so it's got me looking for what other self-study courses can I do. And I did found that the UN had a few that were related to disaster management that I've sort of pinned that I would like to, when I get some time, go through
Mhm.
as well. And I think that there's probably more organizations that are tied to maybe not just as much GIS, but um, in the disaster management field. So again,
Yeah,
within the U.S.,
so
we have FEMA. FEMA has a
yeah.
bunch of courses, and so I think that those are things that I'm looking at. And one of the sort of specialties that I'm considering is kind of that GeoInt AI. So looking at how this applies to intelligence, and the part of intelligence that I'm most interested in is the disaster part of intelligence,
Mhm.
because one of the things that had sort of bubbled up in the media space in the GeoInt community last year was extreme weather as a national security threat. And I think even the Netherlands has to deal with the fact that they're a low-lying country and climate impact is real, and that they have to figure out how do we mitigate this and address this for our entire nation. And so that's national security.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Because the countries who are like a flatland are actually very difficult to tackle with such kind of weather. So,
Yeah, because you talk about flooding, and I think we can. When you talked about flooding, I immediately thought of sort of the floods in Pakistan, and I had done a story map that was about flooding last year, and we were looking at floods in a very sort of specific time frame. And so I did a story about Pakistan. I did New Zealand, Sao Paulo, and Zambia all sort of had extreme flooding, and I did that. But as soon as you sort of we brought this back to the Netherlands, I don't think of the Netherlands as having flood events,
no.
but I think of it more sort of in terms of ocean rise.
Yeah, so now it's like they have lot of measures already taken. So, flooding is not there for sure.
Wait, sorry, flooding is or isn't? Sorry, what were you saying about flooding?
So, like now, Netherlands has taken lot of measures to prevent flooding. So even like now it's not we haven't seen flooding here yet.
He's not. Oh, so wait, where I'm okay, and this is what I'm saying is there's certain places where it's a crisis and it's unexpected, and but it's a rain event, and it sounds like in the Netherlands they're taking a lot of preventive measures, but I'm sure there's a lot of proactive, so it doesn't become a crisis, it doesn't become a disaster, but it sounds like they're working very hard to mitigate it and to build structures and to sort of get ahead of it
Yeah,
and be aware that this is happening, and if we don't do something about it, it will be a disaster. But we're getting ahead of it and we're planning and we're engineering and we're doing everything we can and that we've done for centuries because I think that country is used to that.
yeah, that's
And
right.
yeah, and so there's different approaches to disaster of what is or isn't a disaster and how and I think that that's something I'm very passionate about is getting ahead of it. And this I think is a lead in into AR and VR is sometimes people can't see what they can't see. And if you can
Yeah,
show
that's
it to
right.
them, if they can see it, if they can experience it. I remember one of my big aha moments just came when we began studying urban planning and we were looking at Miami and we were looking at flood rise. And that was the very first time that I saw a GIS slider where you could sort of move it along and see Miami's sea level rise at different places. And I was like, and it was in a 3D, and I was like, this is amazing. I'm like, this is the kind of work that I was just so taken by as sort of just an interesting and powerful way to communicate to people and to help them see it. But I think AR and VR can and holograms can also really help with that because people they say you don't work towards what you can't see. And so if it's a goal, if it's life, career, family, anything that you want, if you can't see it and don't have a vision in your mind for it, you're not going to work towards it if you don't
Yeah,
believe you can have it. And
this is how it is, right?
yeah, so I think that that's the same thing with disaster management. If people don't see it as a threat, don't see it as a problem, they're not going to put funds towards it. They're not going to put work towards it. And I think a lot of our world needs a lot more resiliency planning.
Yeah, that is actually right. And I think this where AR and VR plays a very important role because I think recently I read an article about how they are using VR technology to educate kids in Japan to understand how to tackle disaster. So isn't that amazing how they are using these technologies and helping people to understand and let's say training them to tackle disaster to save their own lives, right? So this is why I really like this technologies, and this is why I got very much attracted towards it. And I mean, there are a lot of aspects of it. Like, let's take an example of the AR. Like now, recently I read about a VGIS. They are doing amazing work in the civil engineering sector, right? So how these technologies are helping us to go ahead with our with our field, and how they're helping, how they're making our work easy. That is the most important part to look at. I mean, and how minutely we can analyze things using this kind of technologies. So this is amazing.
Well, and I think there's two very important parts of our work, and I think that this is something that, as I was saying before, I have a very extroverted part of myself and I have a very introverted part of myself. The introverted part of myself has always loved being a writer, a creator, and the extroverted part of myself has always loved telling a story, putting on a show, and stakeholder engagement, and just management and administration. And I think that as GIS professionals, we need to be both, because we can get into that really technical, beautiful, and the technical tools are there. But to me, GIS is another tool in my communication toolkit. And I think that we use this because sometimes you need a little bit of the wow factor or the engagement factor to get stakeholder buy-in, to get funding, to get what is needed to solve these problems. And if you can't get people's attention that a problem is a problem, you'll never get the support to solve the problem. And so
Yeah,
I
that
think,
is right. I agree. I agree with your point that sometimes being an extroverted is also help us, right? But I think it depends on the person to person, and if a person just be themselves, whoever they are, doesn't matter if they're introvert or extrovert, if they can communicate their things properly, then I think it works, right?
yeah, but I'm saying that some of these tools and some of these things that have a little more sort of, I'll say, sex appeal, as far as the AR, the VR, the holograms, just kind of can create that, okay, I mean, in the public, okay, you've got my attention, or in management and administration, or in leadership, where you're able to create uh, quietly, technically, collaboratively, however, within a GIS community, things that can then go outside of a GIS community and get that buy-in and get that attention and get the result that we're looking for, which is for people to pay attention and say, I literally see the problem. I did not see it before. And when I see it, I can now do what they do best to gather support, gather resources, take action, um, vote, whatever it is that we want them to do, because they can see it in a way that they've never seen it before.
And I think also here comes the fun part, because because people enjoy this kind of technologies, right? If we give a headset to some kid and ask that kid to just move into the like, just like I saw in that video, that how the kids were moving through the flood and they were trying to understand. It's fun. It's like you're playing a game, right? So if people uh, like have fun through it, if they understand it, then they'll understand the complexities of it, right? Then they will understand what the problem is, right? And once they understand the problem, they'll start taking steps towards it, right? Or at least they'll have that curiosity to solve it, right? So I think these technologies are bringing that change in the market right now, that they have built the curiosity within people. But I think still it hasn't haven't reached to the to the population that is that huge, right? Because it's expensive,
And that's why I feel
right?
like, because of it's expensive, that's where GIS itself is collaborative, because we need other people, we need management, administration, leadership to provide that funding, to say, yes, this is important and we will get behind you. We might not be GIS professionals ourselves. We might not even understand what you do or how you do it, but we understand that you need infrastructure, you need support. Like you said, you need workable data sets, and we will do the work to support you in procuring that. Because from a larger level, there's a whole conversation about data governance and data security and all of those things that require people who are not just GIS professionals to create not only that infrastructure, but that political support that helps gather that financing and create laws that hold certain requirements and standards and accountability and structure. I mean, I think that's another thing within GIS. There's the, and again, I'm not sure if some of these standards are international or just within the US, but there's the GISP, the GIS professional certificate. And I know
Mhm.
that's a EURESA certificate, so that might be more on the US side than the
I
European
think it
side,
is more towards US side. Yeah.
but there's other, other ways that we can sort of stand out as GIS professionals. And so I think that this is where I feel like we as GIS professionals need to continue to engage, educate, collaborate with those outside of GIS, because they need to understand that they have to provide these things that we need so we can get the job done, so that ultimately we help them.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you because this kind of the technologies like VR and AR will help us a lot even in the future. So if we get more funding, if we get more attention towards it, then at least we'll be able to lower the cost and bring it to the common man, right? Like let's take like oh sorry let's say that I'm also from a GIS background. I studied in a very reputed university, an amazing university, but I don't have funds to buy that expensive technology. I don't have funds to buy the headset, but I want to experience that, what it is. I want to experience what VR is. I want to experience what AR is. So I think now in the market, people have brought a very nice, like ideas of how people are bringing it to the smartphones. They're bringing AR on the smartphones. They're bringing it on a tablet. They can, so people can easily access it. Right? I think that is brilliant how in the market that new ventures are coming out, new ideas, they're solving these issues, right? So I think coming in the future, it will happen, it will come to the common man. I think people are working on it and this kind of technologies will develop more.
Well,
So
and
I
that's actually what I'm building right now. It's for this Google immersive geospatial challenge, and that's what it's meant to be. Is there's a few different tools that you can work with, and one of them is an AR and a VR tool, and the other ones are kind of immersive maps with 3D tiling. And so they're trying. I mean, from working and just being around the Google ecosystem, things that I'm learning is they're like, hey, we're building these technologies, but they're for you to build on, they're for you to use. And whether they're speaking to developers or GIS professionals or GI professionals who are sort of at the beginning, like I am, of coding, that we can go in and build these things at no or low cost to us to at least build and deploy them. And there's a lot of public available data. Now, the cost come is if we need private data or we need more data or we need data storage. So if I had a million people come in and use my VR, it would cost me money because you're kind of it's scalable. So the more people that use it, the more hits that go to that API, the more storage that I need, the more that it's going to cost me to host and maintain it. But to be able to sort of build it on my own at no cost is amazing. And
yeah,
then, and then the sort of the, if it scales, then it comes with more costs. So
yeah,
that's kind of fun to see that those things are becoming a little bit more accessible for all of us to use and to build with. One of the tools that they're promoting is also called Adobe Aero, and that's kind of another sort of 3D environment. And then I've kind of been playing with SketchUp, and then I learned through school that we have access to CAD, and so I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to kind of play with sort of some of the BIM tools and some of the 3D modeling and see what I can build in that space. And with a pointed focus on disaster and human security and resiliency. I mean, again, building on that sort of urban planning background that I have.
Yeah, that is actually nice, and also this kind of technology can help you build serious games to understand the recovery part, to understand the resilience, disaster resilience, and mm, let's not also let's also focus on other sectors, like let's say urban planning, architecture. They are using GIS on a very large scale, right? So it is also useful for them.
Yep. And actually, one of the things I'd like to see that doesn't exist right now in generative AI and disaster management and GIS is one of the things I was playing with is so one of the things that Bard does is that you can ask it to give you information, and then you can ask it to put on a table, and then you can turn that table into a Google Sheet. So it can generate tabular data. So technically, it can generate a data set. It doesn't do that really well now. It can give you about 5, maybe 10 places. And when I brought it to the attention of my professor, she said, "Yeah, it actually is not really good at knowing what's the center point. It's not kind of accurate in the information it gives you." But I see huge potential there. So for example, let's say you're in a disaster situation and you could go to the generative AI and you could say to it, "What are all the fire stations? Give me their names and locations. What are all of the shelters? Give me their name and locations. Where are the hospitals?" And I could literally just ask it to generate this for me, and that it could do it accurately with a center point, and that you could actually build a map based on data that you got from generative AI that is accurate, and
That will
you
be
can,
amazing.
yeah, and there's not necessarily big data. I don't know that it would do, tens of thousands of records, but at least within a city or within a county, you could get the few hundred of each of the sort of items that you're looking for. Right now, I could do it not quite accurately with about 5, because I was like San Diego fire stations or Oceanside fire stations, and it was interesting to see, like, it was kind of getting there, but it wasn't quite there yet. But I was like, wow, I see huge potential in that.
Yeah, I mean, if we can see this possibility, then for sure in the future we are going to see these things, right?
Yeah. And that was anyways, that's my like wish list for generative AI, is that I would like to see it, that we could actually build our data sets,
Yeah,
and
that
with,
will be actually amazing.
yeah, with accuracy, based on obviously what it's been trained on, but that we could actually do that. So that's my future of AI, and what I'd like to see, uh, that it gets there. But right now it's limited, and it still hallucinates quite a bit. And I know
Yeah,
this
I
because,
mean, of course, it takes time, right? To get there, it takes time. It's a step-wise process. You keep improving things, right?
yep.
So I think let's give them some time.
Oh, they're getting there. I mean, got to spend a day at Google with their research team, as they were looking for academics, and because I'm in the ecosystem, I got that invite, and it was amazing because they were working on sort of next generation, and actually asking for advice for one of the developers. He just said, don't get it caught in the tutorial loop, build stuff. And I think that's still true of GIS professionals. We need to build stuff. And so but it was interesting to see kind of where they're going next, and that intersection of images, text, uh, multimedia, kind of generation. So no, I think we're at a very, very exciting space and time, and I'm just so excited that we can be here together today to celebrate GIS Day. And I'm actually using this as just a kickoff for a ton of just GIS interviews and content, because I feel like there's so much I see that I'm excited to share. There's so many people that I want to give a platform to, because I love doing this, and I want to learn to be a better editor. But I like to do kind of these kind of just basic ones just to begin, and sort of build our community. So I thank you so much for joining us here today, and being part of Esri's GS Day celebration with me here. We are an official event, and excited for more of these interviews, and just such a pleasure to meet you today. So if you have any parting words, we'll sort of end it there.
Well, it's always good to have such conversations, and I'm looking forward to have some more in the future. So thank you
I
so much for having me here, Philippa. And yeah, I mean, I think GIS is growing a lot, and with this kind of technologies, I believe we can grow more, and believe to see. get more stuffs, more futuristic stuffs in the future. Get to
That's,
play with lot of data set. It's quite interesting.
and data is just coming at us more and more. So that's a whole other conversation that we can have. But I will wrap it there, and I thank everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.